Hello everyone, and today we're going to continue reading Lee Strobel's The Case for Miracles, and today we are in Chapter 5, Our Miraculous Universe and Planet. Imagine that you are in a control room. Everywhere you look, you see hundreds of dials, buttons, and knobs. Each one controls a different variable that makes intelligent life possible, and each one has to be tuned exactly right. According to Dr. Strauss, if you turn any one of them a little to the left or a little to the right, poof! Intelligent life becomes impossible anywhere in the universe. Over the last 50 years, physicists have discovered that the variables in the universe are just that finely tuned. Variables like the strength of gravity, the distance the Earth is from the Sun, and many, many more each have to be just right in order for life to exist. And obviously, each variable is. The universe has everything we need to live. In other words, the universe is fine-tuned for human existence. And that's not only the opinion of Christian scientists. Virtually every scientist agrees the universe is finely tuned. The question is, how did it get this way? Matter matters. I asked physicist Dr. Strauss for a few examples of that fine-tuning. One parameter is the amount of matter in the universe. As the universe expands, all matter is attracted to other matter by gravity. If there were too much matter, the universe would collapse on itself before stars and planets could form. If there were too little matter, stars and planets could never coalesce or form. The particles would just drift off into space. How finely tuned is the amount of matter, I wanted to know. It turns out that shortly after the Big Bang, the amount of matter in the universe was precisely tuned to 1 part in a trillion, 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 Strauss replied. That's a 10 with 60 zeros after it. In other words, throw in a dime's worth of extra matter and the universe wouldn't exist. Strauss continued. British physicist Paul Davies, who's agnostic, said such stunning accuracy is surely one of the great mysteries of cosmology. How does he try to explain it away? He said cosmic inflation might force the universe to have exactly the right amount of matter. Does that make sense? Even if you assume cosmic inflation is a mechanism that works, it doesn't make the fine-tuning problem go away. Why not? Here's an illustration. If I tried to pour gasoline into my lawnmower through a really small hole, it would be very difficult. Why? Because the hole is finely tuned, is a certain size. But if I take the same fuel and pour it into a funnel, then I can easily fill the gas tank. Now, does that fact that I have a funnel, a mechanism that works, mean I've eliminated the fine-tuning problem? No, of course not. If I had a mechanism that works, it also points to a designer. In other words, if you explain the fine-tuning of matter by cosmic inflation, you still have a designer who caused the cosmic inflation. Holding atoms together. Then Strauss offered another fine-tuning example from something he studies in his research, the strong nuclear force. That's what holds together the nucleus of atoms. He explained, ultimately, it's the strength of this force that produces the periodic table of elements. I pictured in my mind the colorful periodic table I studied in chemistry class, which displays all naturally occurring elements from atomic numbers 1, hydrogen, to 94, plutonium, as well as several heavier elements that have only been made in laboratories or nuclear reactors. What happens if you manipulate the strong nuclear force, I asked. If you were to make it just 2% stronger while all the other constants stayed the same, you'd add a lot more elements to the periodic table, but they would be radioactive and life-destroying. Plus, you'd have very little hydrogen in the universe, and no hydrogen, no water, no life. What if the force were weaker? Decrease the force by a mere 5%, and all you'd have would be hydrogen. Again, a dead universe. Another area of my research involves quarks, which make up neutrons and protons. If we change the light quark mass just 2 or 3%, there would be no carbon in the universe. And no carbon means what? I asked. Dr. Strauss gestured at the two of us, that you and I wouldn't be sitting here. The examples go on and on. For instance, there are two forces that have to be in a very precise ratio. They are called electromagnetic force and the gravitational force. It is fine-tuned to 1 part in 10,000 trillion. I don't fully understand this ratio, but scientists say that it's important. Here's an illustration of that same idea that I do understand. Imagine covering 1 billion North American continents with dimes up to the moon, 238,000 miles high. Choose 1 dime at random, paint it red, and put it somewhere in the piles. Blindfold a friend and have him pick out 1 dime from the billion continents. What are the odds he'd choose the red dime? 1 in 10,000 trillion. Fine-tuning like that doesn't just happen by chance. Our place in the universe. Dr. Strauss went on to say, not only is our universe precisely tuned to a breathtaking degree, but our planet is also remarkably and fortuitously situated so that life would be possible. To have a planet like ours where life exists, Strauss says, you need several things. First, you need to be in the right kind of galaxy. There are 3 types of galaxies: elliptical, spiral, and irregular. You need to be in a spiral galaxy like we are because it's the only kind that produces the right heavy elements and has the right radiation levels. But you can't just live anywhere in the galaxy. If you're too close to the sun, there's too much radiation, and there's also a black hole, which you want to avoid. If you're too far from the center, you won't have the right heavy elements. You'd lack the oxygen and carbon you'd need. You have to live in the so-called Goldilocks zone, or the galactic habitable zone where life could exist. And by life, Dr. Strauss is referring to anything more complex than bacteria. To have life, you need a star like our sun. Our sun is what's called a Class G star that has supported stable planet orbits in the right location for a long time. The star must be in its middle age, so its luminosity is stabilized. It has to be a bachelor star, which means it's not orbiting another star as many stars do. Plus, the star should be a 3rd-generation star like our sun. 3rd-generation stars have enough material to create rocky planets like Earth and carbon-based life forms like us. You need a moon like ours. It's very rare to have just 1 large moon in order to stabilize the Earth's tilt. Also, it's nice to have a huge planet like Jupiter nearby to act like a vacuum cleaner by attracting potentially deadly comets and meteors away from you. And those are just a few of the conditions that have to be just right for our planet to support life. You need the right rotation rate, amount of water, and tilt. The planet needs to be the right size so gravity allows gases such as methane to escape, but also allows the gases we need, like oxygen, to stay. In fact, there are at least 322 conditions that have to be exactly right for a planet to support life. That means the odds of having any higher life-supporting planet would be 1 in 1,000,000 trillion 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 trillion. Dr. Strauss said, in science, we have a phrase for probabilities like that. Really? What is it? He grinned. Ain't gonna happen. Design without a designer? You don't have to be a Christian to think that all this fine-tuning is not a coincidence. Here is what Dr. Paul Davies, a professor of physics at Arizona State University and an agnostic, says. There is for me powerful evidence that there is something going on behind it all. It seems as though somebody has fine-tuned nature's numbers to make the universe. The impression of design is overwhelming. British cosmologist Edward R. Harrison was not a Christian, but he wrote, "Here is the cosmological proof of the existence of God. The fine-tuning of the universe provides prima facie evidence of deistic design. Even so, some scientists have come up with bizarre explanations for how this fine-tuning could have happened without God. For instance, John Barrow and Frank Tipler, in their book The Anthropic Cosmological Principle, gave this argument. The universe is clearly designed. Design requires intelligence. Intelligence is only possessed by humans. So they hypothesize that humans will continue to evolve until someday they become like gods, at which point they reach back in time and create the universe themselves. Obviously, this theory is not widely accepted. Neither is the idea that our universe is actually a matrix-like simulation being run on a giant computer by some super programmer. After all, that still raises the problem of how the super programmer's universe came into existence. Then there's the idea that black holes led to the creation of baby universes. These then created more universes through black holes and so on for eternity. But that leaves open the question of where the first black hole producing universe came from. Another hypothesis that quickly evaporated is that the fine-tuning is a result of random chance. The odds of that, scientists say, are functionally equivalent to impossible. The precision is so utterly fantastic, so mathematically breathtaking, that it's just plain silly to think it could have been an accident, Dr. William Lane Craig said. Physicist Robin Collins gave me this analogy when I wrote The Case for a Creator. Imagine that I bet you I could flip a coin and get heads 50 times in a row. If I really did it, you wouldn't accept the results. You'd know that the odds against me getting that many heads in a row are too high, about 1 chance in 1,000,000 billion. The fact that I could do it against such large odds would be strong evidence that the game had been rigged. And the same is true for the fine-tuning of the universe. Before you'd decide that random chance was responsible, you'd decide that there's strong evidence that the universe was rigged. In other words, designed. Another theory called the multiverse theory is that there is a nearly infinite number of other universes. If the dials of physics were twirled at random in all of those, sooner or later one universe would hit the jackpot and get the right conditions for life. Scientists aren't in agreement about the multiverse theory. Stephen Hawking, a highly respected physicist and cosmologist, has argued in favor of that theory. Others point out that the theory can't be tested and there is no observable evidence. One article in Astronomy magazine says the theory straddles a strange world between science fiction and a plausible hypothesis. Oxford philosopher Richard Swinburne was blunt about what he thinks. To postulate a trillion other universes, rather than one God, in order to explain the orderliness of our universe, seems the height of irrationality. The God option. The incredible precision of the universe and our planet is not just intriguing. It's compelling evidence for a miracle-working designer. Dr. Strauss said, "Let's go back to what I know for a fact as a scientist. I know there's one universe that appears to have a beginning, which is incredibly calibrated in a way that defies naturalistic explanations, and there's a highly improbable planet whose unlikely conditions allow us to exist. To me, all of that begs for a divine explanation. But here's a question skeptics frequently ask. If this God made the universe, then who made him?" "Nobody," Dr. Strauss quickly said. The Kalam argument doesn't say whatever exists has a cause. It says whatever begins to exist has a cause. By definition, God never began to exist. He has always existed. He is a necessary, self-existent, eternal being. That's part of the definition of God. Why assume a triangle has 3 sides? Because that's part of what it means to be a triangle. I also recall what William Lane Craig once told me. Atheists themselves used to be very comfortable in maintaining that the universe is eternal and uncaused. The problem is that they can no longer hold that position because of modern evidence that the universe started with the Big Bang. So they can't legitimately object when I make the same claim about God. He is eternal, and he is uncaused. I asked Dr. Strauss, if God is the most likely explanation for our universe and planet, then what can we logically deduce about him from the scientific evidence? He listed several things in his words. First, God must be transcendent because he exists apart from his creation. Second, he must be immaterial or spirit, since he existed before the physical world. Third, he must be timeless or eternal, since he existed before physical time was created. Fourth, he must be powerful, given the immense energy of the Big Bang. Fifth, he must be smart, given the fact that the Big Bang was not some chaotic event, but was masterfully, finely tuned. Sixth, he must be personal, because a decision had to be made to create. Seventh, he must be creative. Just look at the wonders of the universe. Eighth, he must be caring, because he so purposefully crafted a habitat for us. All the qualities we've listed are consistent with the God of the Bible, Dr. Strauss pointed out. If there's just one creator, then that rules out polytheism. Since he's outside of creation, this rules out pantheism. The universe is not cyclical, which violates the tenets of Eastern religions. And the Big Bang contradicts ancient religious assumptions that the universe is static. The purpose of my visit had been fulfilled. Thinking over the case that Dr. Strauss had built, I concluded that the existence of a miracle-working creator who matches the description of God of the Bible has been established beyond a reasonable doubt. And that's the end of chapter 5. I find it so interesting again how we can take some scientific facts and look at it and say, hey, this can only be explained by a creator. And with all of this fine-tuning and the fact that this was not done by accident and that there was a beginning of the universe, showing that something had to create it, again, we see the miracle that God has made in creating the universe. I hope that you can see all of these different explanations are given by an actual physicist, and that these fine-tunings, if they were off just by, a little percent, we could not exist. The earth could not exist. Life could not exist. I hope that me reading this book for you has really opened your eyes up to miracles and the existence of God. Next week, we will continue on as I read the next chapter of Lee Strobel's Case for Miracles. I hope you have a great week. God bless you all.